Fattah al-Sisi ordered allocating an additional 1 billion Egyptian pounds in government support to the National Alliance for Civil Development Work, raising the total funding provided by the state to the alliance to 10 billion pounds. Presidential spokesman Bassem Radi said in a statement that this coincides with declaring 2022 as the year of civil society and in pursuance of the ongoing efforts to promote social protection of citizens in most need by providing all possible forms of support. NACDW was launched in March to ensure effective engagement of civil society institutions in developing communities and meeting their legitimate needs in service, health, education, awareness, and urban fields. The Alliance comprises 24 associations, civil society organizations, and service and developmental entities in addition to the Decent Life Foundation. President al-Sisi announced the contribution during a meeting last week with Prime Minister Mustafa Madbouli, Chief of the General Intelligence Service, Abbas Kamil, and heads of the member institutions of the NACDW. The President also urged the charity and development efforts of the Alliance so as to expand activities regarding creating jobs and increasing production, thus having a positive economic impact. The President voiced appreciation for the Alliance's social activities. In July, NACDW announced in a statement allocating 2.4 billion Egyptian pounds to support 400,000 impoverished families on a monthly basis for 1 year amid the current global crisis. The NACDW will continue its social protection Wasl Khair initiative to provide nutritional, medical and social care, as well as economic empowerment opportunities to around 5 million families in 2022. The statement explained that the Alliance's decision came to ease the current global economic impasse and expand the number of beneficiaries from the social protection programs as per President al-Sisi's directives. Amid the current global economic crisis, al-Sisi has urged the government to focus on the enhancement of social protection programs in the coming period. In a cabinet meeting late last month, the head of state instructed the addition of 1 million new families to the Takaful and Karama, Solidarity and Dignity, cash support programs, thus increasing the number of beneficiaries to more than 20 million citizens nationwide. President al-Sisi also directed the government to disperse a total of £1 billion per month for the next 6 months as exceptional aid to 9 million families. Recipients will include the neediest families and pensioners who receive less than £2,500 a month, as well as the employees whose monthly salaries are less than £2,700. In addition, 2 million subsidized food boxes are made available each month at half their price from the Egyptian Armed Forces food markets. Earlier in July, Minister of Finance Mohammed Maid said that £356 billion of the fiscal year 2022-23 budget have been allocated for social protection and subsidies, while another £400 billion will go towards improving the conditions of the public sector employees, including wages and compensations. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. As we just heard in the report, the President has allocated an extra 1 billion Egyptian pounds to the National Alliance for Civil Development Work. Now, this amounts to a total of 10 billion pounds, all for the development, all to achieve sustainable development goals by 2030. 24 associations and institutions, including the Decent Life Initiative, really trying to increase the number of beneficiaries, Egyptian beneficiaries from this development work and funding. But ladies and gentlemen, right now, the UN Security Council is convening to discuss the Israeli-Islamic Jihad conflict, the Palestinian one that took place for 3 days, and Egypt was able to broker a ceasefire in order to alleviate the sufferings of the Palestinians, provide them with a lot of health aid, food aid as well, and power and fuel generations for the station that was destroyed over there. Dr. Hegazy, now, how effective do you think the UN Security Council will be in establishing some sort of boundaries or limitations for any sort of aggression to take place in the Gaza Strip? How effective can the UN Security Council be in terms of really setting some ground rules for such catastrophic bombing and shelling not to take place in an area, in an enclave that Egypt is actually also investing $500 million?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. No, we have to be realistic, Hani, because you know how the Security Council approaches these issues, right? And now, right now, you have a very divided and very conflicting Security Council. We've got the Russians and the U.S., dealing with the Ukrainian situation. So, and the Chinese are not very happy, obviously, with the Americans. So this, our Security Council, right? These are the voting powers. The rest of the 15 or 13 seats don't really matter. But you got these veto holders who need to agree on a minimum, right? A minimum level of, as you said, calmness and security for the civilians who are being killed on the Palestinian side. And at the same time, when you do that, you are giving incentives to the Palestinians not to attack, not to do any activities or any violence within Israel. So you're giving them something to cling to and to try to protect. But if you offer them nothing, I mean, really they have nothing to lose, right? But the history of the Security Council dealing with the Palestinian issue is not encouraging at all. The situation right now is very unstable, internationally. The only positive thing is that you've got the Arabs behind Egypt in its effort, that Egypt has succeeded in doing something positive in a very short period of time. Maybe that gives a little bit of hope to all the other members of the council that if they give support to the Arabs and to the situation now that we are in, they can develop this into something more positive. But I'm afraid we're going to end up with a resolution that is not going to pass because of the conflicting situation between these big powers, and then even the common denominator that we're looking for is not going to be something satisfying to Egypt or to the Arabs, along the lines of everyone has to stay calm or whatever, which they always say. One thing is the international investigations, which Egypt has called for, and UN as well, have the UN chief has asked for. So I'm waiting to see, at least with respect to the international investigation part, what would be the resolution. We need at least to open the investigation, see what started this, how why Israelis did what they did, and killing civilians, bombarding areas, civilian areas, bombing the power plants and the infrastructure, which, as you said, is Egypt has played a role in rebuilding and reconstructing. I think the investigation and making the Israelis at least pay something for this. Politically, what I mean is not money, but politically pay for their actions. I hope a minimum level of punishment, or showing the Israelis that they cannot keep doing this, especially at this time, right? It's in the interests of the Russians, the Americans, and the Chinese that not too much attention is given to the region, and no big conflict is now taking place in the region. Maybe that you never know. That could be a good surprise, that would lead them to at least put some pressure on the Israelis and issue a resolution that is, giving them a hint that they've got to stop this.
Do you think, Dr. Hegazy, that the three countries you've mentioned, China, Russia, and the US, all with the veto powers, now they all have different conflicts, and it's, be it economic conflicts, be it the Russian-Ukraine conflict, do you think that they would use this issue, the Israeli-Palestinian issue, in a way to settle their scores in different conflicts
within this Israeli-Palestinian one, or do you think that they would actually put all these differences aside and maybe look at the numbers of 43 people killed, 15 children, 4 women, 311 wounded? Do you think that
humanitarian situation,
the humanitarian, the human sort of element, the human factor, do you think that they could put it aside, I mean, regardless of the results of the investigation?
I hope it is the second, because to be honest with you, it would be short-sighted if they go with the with the option of or the idea of this is an opportunity to settle their scores using the Middle East conflict or the situation. I think it's in their interests, at least even for the short period of time, to at least make sure that the Middle East is calm. Because you don't know how this card, or the Middle East problem, could play into a bigger conflict. The situation with China, the situation with the Ukrainians, and you've seen how Egypt recently reacted to the Chinese, the statement by the president about China, that Egypt stands with China on the Taiwan situation, right? That's a message to the Americans as well. So if you make the Arabs angry, we got an issue with the oil in the Gulf. The Saudis were able to accommodate you, but if you keep supporting Israel and Israel keep bombing the Palestinians, at some point, the Arabs, the politicians, right, the governments will have to, show their people something. They cannot, keep this very difficult formula. So I think all of these calculations are playing into the situation and hopefully being taken into consideration by the U.S. and the Russians and the Chinese. U.S. to me is the most important element, because they know how we can make it more difficult for them, economically, as you said, and also politically with the situation in China.
Yes.
So we've got some, really there's a positive thing out of this darkness, right? There's a light, at least, here, which is that you've got some cards as the Arabs. You've got some cards to play and to show that you're relevant. And hopefully we get everyone to stand together behind Egypt, and so that we have I say a stronger position and a heavier weight. With in negotiating with the West in general.
Yes. Well, we've seen all the praise the international leaders have thrown at Egypt for brokering the ceasefire. Do you think that the UN could actually, I mean, including the US, do you think that the UN can actually issue a resolution that would at least protect the Egyptian reconstruction work there, getting Egypt into the equation, trying to protect the civilian lives who are actually doing construction work for the Gaza enclave, trying to protect the Egyptian work, and in turn trying to protect the Gaza enclave?
Egypt, as you said, Egypt have companies working in Gaza, and have people, engineers and workers in Gaza. So it becomes an international issue if Israel, continues to do that. So I hope so. I hope the resolution will touch on that, and I hope the resolution will build on what the Egyptians have done in getting the ceasefire, and will commend the role, but also encourage Israel to honor the ceasefire. This is the minimum I can expect from the resolution. I hope it goes further than that. But honoring the ceasefire, as long as the Palestinians stay calm in Gaza, then you can't continue your measures, your violent measures against them. Your bombing, your shelling, and all these things that unjustifiable. I hope that it would be the minimum, and send really a strong message, maybe not in the resolution, maybe behind the scenes, to Israel that we don't have time for this. We have bigger fish to fry, right? And bigger situation in the Ukraine, bigger conflict with China. We cannot afford at all to be playing with fire here in the Middle East. So I hope that this message was sent, and I think it was sent to the Israelis, and that's why maybe the reaction from the Israelis was also quick.
Yes.
This time.
Well, a lot of political analysts and observers criticize the UN in general being mostly a ceremonial sort of political player.
Yeah.
And we've seen a lot of condemnation for targeting the Israeli side for not abiding by the international laws and resolutions. So do you expect Israel to follow suit with what the whole international community has been used to, not really abiding or obeying international law and resolution? Or do you think maybe now that Egypt has serious work, Egyptian lives, Egyptian companies, Egyptian money and investment within the Gaza enclave, maybe things could prove a little bit different?
I hope so. The situation is different now, right? You've got, at least some sort of development on the normalization level between the Arabs, especially the Gulf Arabs and the Israelis. So this is something for them to protect, right? For the Israelis, hopefully they have an interest to keep this. If the situation deteriorates in Gaza, and then later on in other parts of Palestine, it would be very, very difficult for this deal to continue, right? With the Arabs. As you said, with Egypt, the situation now, diplomacy is in a good, I think, terms with the Israelis now. Our diplomacy, we're talking, we're able to achieve things together. So they're going to lose all of these cards, the Israelis, if they escalate the situation. And also, I think the Americans would lose their patience with them, right? Because they're not, they're not ready for this. They don't have time for this at all. So they are in a tough situation. Plus, they are not a very stable government internally. So with all these pressures, I hope that they will choose not to escalate. And I think the situation is moving towards that direction because it's not in the best interest. And also, it's not in the best interest of the Americans. For the first time, interests are kind of coinciding at the same time. And also the Arabs, at least, with the inflation, Egypt has, big issues as we report about the implications of the inflation and its impact on people. We need time to work, right, and to push our economy. We don't have time to delay things and to be worried about, our borders and what's happening on Gaza. So it's in the interest of everyone, really, to stay calm.
Well, we've mentioned Russia, China and the US as part of the UN Security Council, but what about the remaining seats? What about the big European players within the UN Security Council? Do you feel that even if Russia and China and the US agreed upon something, do you think that maybe the big European players would actually want to just nudge a little bit at Russia's sort of stance, whatever it is?
I think the Europeans will always follow the Americans, whatever their stance is, especially now, right? With the situation with Russia. Absolutely. They will follow, whatever the Americans decide to do. And if the Americans agree with the Russians and the Chinese on a minimum level of calmness and ceasefire and long-term ceasefire, I think they will follow that, and they will actually support. They will play the role in supporting that resolution and coming, to the region and making sure that Israel listen. And so that's the rule, right? They always, come to make sure whatever the Americans and whatever the big players have decided in the region. This is really my experience with them.
Yes. Dr. Hegazy, now you've mentioned that the Israeli side looks a little bit different than what we've been used to for decades. A different prime minister, all the Arabs are backing Egypt's stance, and there's been a lot of normalizations of relations between Israel and a lot of the Arab states. Do you feel that now we are seeing a different sort of strategy or a different dynamic to the Israeli side in terms of listening or accepting or heeding for Arab stances and demands? Do you think there's a certain level of trying to reach a win-win situation between both sides that will hopefully ultimately benefit the Palestinian issue?
Hani, absolutely right. I think always when you see the Arabs on one side, which hasn't been the case for a long time, right? Always there's internal conflicts within the Arab world, Israel, the U.S., and other players use those the divisions and differences to take advantage of them and say, well, you guys don't agree among yourselves, and so how do you expect me to deal with you? But this time, I think everyone, I didn't see anyone who's going in a different direction. Everyone is behind Egypt, from the Gulf to the North Africans. Everyone thinks that Egypt, is now ready to play this role, and hopefully Israel gets this message. There isn't a big internal Arab conflict right now, on the surface. There are always small differences, but on this issue, at least, there is some sort of solidarity with the Palestinians. That, I agree with you, is a good opportunity for us, and hopefully it put some pressure on the Israelis to take advantage of the situation and to keep things calm, at least for now.
Yes. Well, what do you expect the result would be regarding the investigations into the three-day conflict?
It is very clear violations of international law by any measure, right? So absolutely, I would say neutral international investigation would lead to this conclusion. And so many other investigations have led to that. Hopefully, this time, the international community could take actions upon the coming up with the result of the report that will come up. Take actions against Israel, make Israel pay once for some of these horrific actions they've taken in Palestine. Hopefully,
yes.
I hope so.
Well, a lot of people want to. Talking about a coronavirus pandemic, climate change, everything needs money, and everybody needs to put in their share of work and cooperation. Do you think it still would be feasible?
I think so. I think so. I mean, I'm not saying Israel will pay money, but at least to show that once you do this, you should expect to pay for it. Whether it's
held accountable.
To be held accountable. But with no accountability, it gives you incentive at least not to cooperate, right?
Yes. Well, ladies and gentlemen, the UN Security Council is convening as we speak to discuss and investigate the three-day conflict that took place between the Israeli sides and the Islamic Jihad movement in Palestine. Thankfully, a ceasefire was brokered by the Egyptian side that has been commended and praised by the international leaders from around the world, and hopefully more fruitful resolutions, more conclusions, better conclusions for the Palestinians, accountability to the Israeli sides, be held accountable for what took place. And we'll be following this all here on Nile TV International. But unfortunately, that's all the time we have for this edition of the Daily Debate. Before we go, I'd like to thank my very distinguished guest, Dr. Waleed Hegazy, the international legal law expert. Dr. Hegazy, it's been a pleasure having you with us on the show.
Thank you, Hani.
Thank you very much, sir. Ladies and gentlemen, please stay tuned for more coming up on Nile International. I'm Hani Saif. Thank you for joining us.